Hi and hello, Dune Imperium fans. I hope all is well with you wherever you are in the world today, and welcome. This is Dune Imperium, and I am Admiral Trench. Please forgive me for the time being. It's a little crooked, I can see that. I'm going to make the corrections now, if you'll just bear with me momentarily. Yeah, here we go. An ever so slight twist of the angle there. Should be better. There we go. I think that's slightly better. In any case, let's see here. The problem is that here's really the issue. Let's try this. I'm just going to move my entire table once and for all. Just move it ever so slightly like that. Right? Just like an inch over to the right there. Yeah, and the reason why I'm going to do it that way, I'll tell you why. It's because I've been dealing with this for some time now. This is what I have to deal with. Right? See, now it's flat. Perfect. So it's could be better, but you get the picture. Okay, so why am I doing this live stream? Well, it turns out that earlier today I was on Reddit, and I was just looking through the Dune Imperium subreddit, and we had a question from someone who's new to the game, and they had several questions, and I thought, you know what, this is a good opportunity for me to kind of give a piece of my mind about this game and give some helpful tips. When I started this channel, it was a goal of mine that I really wanted to be a voice in the community for this game. I wanted to be someone who could construct strategies with other people, share ideas, and I really thought that this particular person, Stormy Waters 2021, I really thought this particular person actually asked like some really good questions, and I wanted to kind of go through it and put my 2 cents into the hat, and you all can decide whether or not that it's good advice. I think it's decent advice. It may not be the best ever, but I really think it's quite good. It's something to at least consider, especially for new people. I also wanted to kind of get into other little ideas that I have about this game as well. So this will be a series called Plans Within Plans. And this is the first episode of Plans Within Plans, where I'm just going to kind of go over some basic tips and tricks of the game. And if I decide to do it again, it'll be Plans Within Plans 2, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's just start with the first question. I'm gonna just read what this person wrote in his entry on Reddit, and then we'll get into it. New player question. Hey everyone, I just got the game from Humble Bundle, and I've been playing it a lot the last few days, but I'm still having some trouble strategizing and was hoping to get some insight from the more experienced community here. Apologies if these are stupid questions. I just learn better by talking to others. And let me tell you, after reading your questions, they are not stupid questions, not at all. These are very good beginner questions. So I'm going to start with the first question. How much does your starting hand affect your strategy and the trajectory of your game? Like, if your opening hand has certain cards in it, does that set up what path you're taking more broadly, or do you have a strategy already in mind and you adapt that strategy based on your draw? Okay, so I'll tell you this. I have before you on the table, this is the starting hand for the base game. Okay, you've got this is your starting deck of 10 cards: a reconnaissance, a signet ring, 2 Dune the Desert Planet cards, 2 convincing arguments, 2 daggers, a seeking ally, and a diplomacy. Now, if you have Rise of Ix, we're going to remove this card and we're going to replace it with this card. And then if you happen to have the Immortality expansion, you remove both of these cards and you replace them with 2 experimentations. But we're not going to talk about Immortality for this Plans Within Plans. We are going to talk about the base game and the Rise of Ix because the person I'm responding to only plays digital. All right, so they're either playing the base game or they're playing with the Rise of Ix. Now, at present time, the person I'm responding to only has the base game, and they actually go on later to ask if they should get the Rise of Ix. And my answer to that is yes, if only you truly love this game, because if it's something that you kind of fall out of love with, and let's face it, a lot of board games are that way, you're going to pay the money, but you're not going to get your money's worth. Does that make sense? So the juice isn't worth the squeeze unless you really love this game. So this is a good opportunity to kind of figure that out. Now, I do think you're going to like this game a lot if you give it some time. And if you're not already falling in love with it, then getting the expansion is going to be totally worth it for you. But let's just get into what this person was asking in their first question. I'm not going to respond to every possible starting hand you can get. I'm only going to address the swingiest starting hands you can get to sort of explain my thinking on this game. At the very, very, very beginning of this game, the first thing I do is look at the Imperium row. And I've already set up some example cards at the top. Power Play, Thufir Habit, Lady Jessica, Sardaukar Infantry, Guild Ambassador. Okay? Those are just sample cards. Now, normally, you've got 2 5s, a 7, and a 1 and a 4. This is a possible starting Imperium row, but likely you're going to see a little bit more parity. But I wanted those specific cards out there for the sake of conversation. So the way I look at it is we've got to imagine that you've got a starting hand of... Let's begin with thinking about the swingiest starting hands, okay? Let's say you start with 2 convincing arguments in your hand, a Signet Ring and 2 Dune Desert Planet cards. All right, so your base persuasion getting out of this game is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right here, okay? Now, the first thing I do, as I mentioned before, is look at what the Imperium row is offering. Lady Jessica is 7 persuasion. It takes 7 persuasion to purchase Lady Jessica. Lady Jessica is one of the most powerful cards in the game. If it's the first turn and you've got 7 persuasion in your hand like this, it is, in my opinion, worth it to forget about your agents and just buy Lady Jessica in the first round. That's my opinion, because Lady Jessica is such a powerful card. It lets you go to green, blue, and yellow spaces and Bene Gesserit spaces. It lets you draw 2 cards, and immediately when you purchase the card, you get to move a faction tracker up 1. Moving that faction tracker up 1 is huge. The idea that you also get 3 persuasion and 1 combat on a reveal is also pretty amazing too. If you purchase Lady Jessica with her 2 card draw ability and the 3 persuasion on a reveal, I highly recommend that you strategize purchasing Arrakis Liaison cards, which, you know, they would be like right here. Those are the Fremen cards that give you 2 persuasion. Anything in this game that gives you 2 persuasion, I would start buying those and consider working forward toward a Spice Must Flow strategy where you are going to be taking a High Council for more persuasion and then buying Spice Must Flow cards. That's going to help you get victory points. Obviously, buying a Spice Must Flow is an automatic victory, but a victory point. But with Lady Jessica giving you 3 persuasion, and then you start purchasing other cards out of the Imperium row that give you 2 persuasion and more, and then you work forward toward the High Council, it's going to make, especially drawing those 2 cards, every time you draw a card, you could potentially be racking up persuasion points, which will help you buy Spice Must Flows. Okay, so that's my thinking coming out of the gates with 2 convincing arguments as in your starting hand. It's a pretty powerful persuasion hand. Okay, now this isn't what you would typically see. This is a pretty powerful starting hand if only the Imperium row actually had good cards in it, like a Lady Jessica. As I had mentioned before, there's going to be a lot more parity in a typical Imperium row, So it's likely that Lady Jessica isn't going to be available, and you might see something more akin to a power play, a Sardaukar Infantry, or Guild Ambassador. And those cards are not worth nearly as much. Those are 4, 5, and 1. So the 2 convincing argument cards are not going to be very helpful to purchasing cards like that in the Imperium row. I mean, yes, they give you the persuasion, but you don't need to invest so much to getting those cards. I would definitely recommend using putting your agents on the board in that case and just saving the persuasion on the side. That's 4 persuasion. Maybe consider a Guild Ambassador. You're only going to be using 2 cards, so that's 5 persuasion. Definitely go for the Thufir Hawat or the power play, deciding on what you want to do. My personal opinion, between power play and Thufir Hawat, which card is better? Thufir Hawat is better because you get to go to faction spaces, and those are important, plus you draw a card. So it's as if it sort of replaces itself with another card after you put an agent on the board. I kind of look at it that way. If you happen to not use it, you get an intrigue card, and those are extremely valuable. Power play is also a very good card because it trashes itself after you use it, so it kind of helps you whittle down your deck. That's my thinking on those 2 cards. But yeah, so this is what I would recommend. If there is a powerful card in the Imperium row, I would recommend maybe using 1 agent or no agents in the first round to buy a better card out of the Imperium row if you're beginning with a swingy 2 convincing argument opening hand. Now let's ignore that. Let's move on to the next possible swingy hand, okay? Let's talk about 2 daggers in the starting hand, okay? Now, for a lot of reasons, I would say this is kind of a lame starting hand, okay? But your combat, I don't know what the starting combat is going to be, what the rewards are going to be for first, second, or third place. But what I can tell you is that with 2 daggers in your hand, everybody's starting at the same level as you, okay? So with 2 daggers in your hand, I think this would be a good incentive to consider getting involved in the combat and trying to take the victory. In the very first conflict, it is not worth it to dump all your troops into the combat. It's just save those for later if possible. But with 2 daggers behind you, like helping you out, put in like 1 or 2 troops, and then this is going to give you the edge over your other other opponents, because it's likely they haven't drawn a 2 dagger starting hand. Now it's possible, but it's just not likely. They might have 1 dagger, and it's not going to be enough to beat you unless they dump in all their troops. And at that point, it's kind of the joke's on them because they're investing so much in that first conflict. It's never really worth it. You know, it's not, in my opinion, to put so much in the first round, not worth it. So the joke's on them. If they really want to put that much in there, let them do it. You know, don't get in the way of your opponents making mistakes. So anyways, with 2 daggers in your starting hand like this, you have very low persuasion, 3 persuasion. You can buy a Sardaukar Infantry or a Arrakis Liaison card. It's not a lot up there that you can see, at least at present time, in the Imperium row that you can purchase with this. Not a big deal, though. You can get your rewards out of the conflict, and I would recommend using your Signet Ring, take Carthag, get the troop, get the Intrigue card. The Intrigue card could give you some combat points, or it could give you other resources, other ways to win. Who knows what it's going to give you? It's an Intrigue card, but the point is your opponent doesn't know what that is. That's yet another reason why they are probably going to think twice before meeting you face-to-face in the combat. So you will have an edge because you have 2 daggers and an Intrigue card, okay? That's what I would recommend that you do if you're starting with a dagger. Now, another possible thing to do if you start a hand with something like, I don't know, like this as an example, 1 dagger, and you've got 3 persuasion points, but you really, really want that Guild Ambassador because you think that you want to try to get the Alliance coin with the Spacing Guild, and you want to try to spend 3 spice for a victory point down the road. And that's not a terrible card. Guild Ambassador is not a terrible card. You can get some spice out of it and all those other things. So it's kind of a nice little card there. What I would recommend you do is take I would recommend that you take tech negotiation over here on the Planet Ix, and that's going to help you. That's if you have the expansion, that is, I should say. I think it's called, oh my goodness, off the top of my head, I can't remember the original board space, what it's called. Give me a minute here and I'll look it up. Just give me a moment and I will look it up. Dun, 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 dun. Aha. Here we go. Got a lot of pictures of the base game. Oh gosh. Can you believe it? Well, off the top of my head, I can't remember what that space is called, and it's not going to tell me on the internet. It's not as easily accessible as I thought it was going to be. I had imagined I would just be able to Google it up and see it and be like, oh, there it is. But no, not as easy as that. I see a lot of Dune Imperium on the digital, but I do not see it. Nope, that's Uprising. Come on, come on, come on. I don't want to keep everybody waiting. Sorry, guys, this is probably super boring. It doesn't matter. There's a similar space in the base game to tech negotiation where you would get a troop and 1 persuasion. Okay, and I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, so I apologize for that. But the point is that would help you get more persuasion. So that's what I would recommend you do with a starting hand such as 2 daggers. That's a pretty swingy opening hand. But if you've got, okay, if you've got a opening hand with 2 cards like Diplomacy and Seek Allies, where you've got factions on your side, okay, always as a beginner, I would recommend that you use Seek Allies to utilize the fold space. And the reason why is because fold space lets you go everywhere on the board and you get to draw a card. So once again, it replaces itself with another card. Not always a good idea, especially if there's cards that you need in the next round. Like that can be iffy. You got to think about that. You go, oh, I really need next round. I need to draw this card, and you don't want to run the risk of drawing the card that you need in the round that you don't need that card. Once that card's in your hand, it goes to your discard pile. You're not going to get it the next round. So it's not always good to draw cards unless you're thinking of perhaps buying a fold space. I'm sorry, not a fold space, buying a Spice Must Flow or something like that, or buying a high powerful card out of the Imperium row, like say a Lady Jessica, a CHOAM Directorship, or Kwisatz Haderach. Drawing cards in those instances is always good, so you can get the persuasion. So fold space is good. And especially if you go to a place like the research station or selective breeding, something like that, you'd get to draw not 2 cards, but a potential 3 or 4 cards, depending on what version of the game you're playing. So it's a very swingy card if you're using it correctly. And fold space is also helps you move up the Spacing Guild track too, so you have that added benefit. And then your Diplomacy, if you have the water, it's your opening hand, right? So if you would like to use water, or if you'd like to try to get an intrigue card, or you'd like to take wealth, that's what I would do. Now, it just so happens that it's my personal opinion that the Emperor track is the least interesting of the factions. So what I tend to like to do with an opening hand like this is I will use Seek Allies for fold space if it's available, and then I'll use Diplomacy for wealth. And I get the 2 Solari, and I move that Emperor track. And what I like to try to do is get it going up 1, and then find a way later on to get that victory point without having to go back to the Emperor track if I can avoid it. I hate going to these spaces. I hate the Emperor track. For me, it's just those 2 spaces are like the least good spaces on the table. I don't like them. Anyways, the point is that's still a good victory point. So go there once and then try to get that up again later somewhere else, possibly by buying a Memo Quarters, buying a Lady Jessica, buying anything that's going to help you move that faction tracker up, a CHOAM directorship, something like that. That's how I would utilize getting this victory point. I don't like going to Emperor Track any more than one time if possible. It's just my own opinion. Other people might disagree with that. But I usually find myself going to Bene Gesserit spaces at least twice a game, Fremen track at least twice a game, and Spacing Guild track at least twice a game. Once for Fold Space, once for Hayliner in the later part of the game. So these are usually locked up. I tend not to need to go to Emperor track any more than once a game. And even then, I don't necessarily need it except for just to get it moving at least up one space. So Emperor is, in my personal opinion, just not that good. But that's my opinion. You might decide otherwise later on when you get more experience. So that's how I would tend to use my opening round. And the first conflict is never really that good, so you can let it go. You usually can let it go without getting involved in combat, and you don't need to feel bad about that because the combat in the first round is not really ever very satisfying anyway. Although I'm not going to lie, you will feel the sting when you see them getting the rewards when they only put in like 1 or 2 troops, and then you see them take away those rewards. You'll be like, oh, that was really easy, low-hanging fruit. But it's okay. Just let it go. It tends not to be worth it in the first round anyway. So unless, of course, you've got the 2 daggers, then I say go for it. Okay, so the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is if you are playing with the Rise of Ix, you will have this card called Control the Spice. Okay, and in the first round, you know, Imperial Basin, none of the desert spaces have the bonus spice on the board. So having the ability to control the spice is not a card that I would actually use in the first round unless you want to trash out, say, something like a dagger or something like that. If you want to trash out a dagger in the first round, this is actually quite a good card. Plus, it generates a troop. Okay, if it's the first round, you get to generate a troop, plus you can put 2 more troops into the combat. So you would be able to put, you know, usually with Imperial Basin, you can put only 2 troops in, and you start with 3 in your garrison. So you can put up to 2. But with this, it would allow you to get up to 3 in the first round. So if you had something that, you know, you wanted to get involved in this combat for whatever reason, this would be the card to help you do that, and you could get rid of your dagger that way. So out of the first round, that is what I would recommend. Otherwise, consider using it to take smuggling and utilize the CHOAM track as much as possible. Again, I tend not to get too involved in conflicts in the first round, only because the rewards are not as good. So as just to recap, answering your first question, there are situations where it's okay to not use your agent if you think it's worth it to buy good cards out of the Imperium row, especially early in the game. It's always a good idea to do that. And so now with that, I'd like to move forward to your next question. When do you develop your game plan? As soon as you have your leader selected, or once you see your opening hand, or before the game even begins? I never really have a strategy before the game begins because so much of the way I think about what to do in this game depends on what's in the Imperium row and what I'm buying. Depending on what I'm buying is going to change radically what my strategy is going to be. As I had said earlier, if I buy Lady Jessica in the first round, I can tell you that I'm heavily incentivized to lean toward doing a Spice Must Flow strategy, buying those cards. And when I was speaking with Brandon Manning, the 2024 champion of this game, he had mentioned one of his favorite cards of the game is Sardaukar Infantry, and it gives you 2 combat points on your reveal turn. It's kind of a dud card, but if you're trying to get involved in combat, if you're a character like the Beast Rabban, then having swords would be useful. And those swords they can add up kind of quickly. Like, let's say you have the Worm Riders card and you have Sardaukar Infantry, or you have, I believe it's called Bene Gesserit's Sister, where you could choose between 2 persuasion or 2 combat. Those things will help you in combat. It definitely gives you an edge because your opponent will be looking at your intrigue card, but they will not know what your reveal is going to show. And when you have that nice reveal, they think that they've gone into combat looking at you with, say, I don't know, 4, and they think they've got the edge because they've got 7, and they may have an intrigue card themselves. But then you come in there with Sardaukar Infantry, Bene Gesserit Initiate or Sister or whatever it's called, Sisterhood, the one that you get to choose the persuasion or the combat. That's going to help you get the edge, and especially if you have the intrigue card as well, that will give you extra combat points, so that will help. I find myself attempting to go for a turn 2 Swordmaster if the cards line up. Is that too early, and am I overvaluing it? No. Okay, so here's what I will say. I will say that having the Swordmaster is extremely valuable. But I play this game, I practice this game by myself very frequently at Kwisatz Haderach level difficulty against House Hagal. When you play at that level, you are not allowed to have a Swordmaster. You are only allowed to play the whole game with 2 agents. Your opponents will get a Swordmaster in the 3rd round. When you play this game enough, you can get good with only 2 agents, but you do begin to feel the sting later in the game when you really want more things to do, but you've only got 2 agents. So it doesn't come without a price. I would recommend that you continue to play moving for that Swordmaster in the 2nd or 3rd round, if you can do it. But also practice playing with only 2. Practice playing without a Swordmaster if possible, if you find that to be satisfying to have that challenge, because you will get benefits out of it. It will sharpen your tactics if you force yourself to only use 2 agents. Because when you're playing this game, everybody wants to get that Swordmaster. And if you decide early enough in the game, I will not get a Swordmaster today, I'm not doing it, you can let everybody else wrestle for it while you are collecting victory points other ways. And it's just one less thing for you to worry about. And there is a thing to that. I think there's something to be said for that. Okay. Should I pick up Ix? Oh, I beg your pardon. Your 4th question is there a ranking for the value of which factions to advance? I typically push Fremen for the water, and I rarely go for Bene Gesserit. I like Hayliner for all the stuff it gives you, and I sometimes go for Conspire if things line up right. Am I undervaluing the faction tracks? Well, as I said before, I don't like Emperor track. It doesn't provide enough, in my opinion, to make it useful. I do like when I end up getting the Alliance coin, and it happens from time to time if it works out that way. I do like that you get the 2 troops when you earn that Alliance coin, so that's always nice, getting more troops. But no, I still find the Emperor track to be the least interesting of them all. My personal favorite faction track is the Spacing Guild, and my second favorite is Fremen, then Bene Gesserit, and last is the Emperor track. And the reason why I love the Spacing Guild track so very much is because of Hayliner. I mean, just like what you said, 5 troops, 2 waters, you get to enter combat. It's so much all at once. Although I've seen people make the mistake of going to Hayliner before the 7th round. Well, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Decide that for yourself, but it's just my opinion. You really shouldn't be going to Hayliner at any point unless it's the 7th, 8th, or 9th round. Once you start getting into those tier 3 conflict cards where the victory points are better because you get like 2 or possibly 3 if you have the Rise of Ix expansion in a given conflict. So putting all your troops in that way is, in my opinion, a smart move to wait until the later game to take Hayliner. So that's my opinion about the factions and how to value them, but you may decide that you have different opinion than me. It's gonna that's just how I see it. Should you pick up Ix? Again, if you really love this game, buy it. and play it, and I think you will enjoy it. But if you're feeling like this isn't your thing, or perhaps maybe it's, I'll be honest with you, a lot of my friends, they all love board games too, and not everybody loves this game. It's, I don't know what it is. For me, it just really does it for me. This is like one of my favorite games of all time, but for some people, they don't love it. I remember one time I was playing with a friend of mine, and he was saying, I think there's too much happening. There's too many things happening all at once. So it just wasn't his game. It's not for him. So if it's not something you love, and I will say that my buddy who said that, one of his favorite board games is Clank, and there's a lot to Clank that I find to be somewhat similar to this, the deck building component at least. And so I thought that was a little surprising that he had said that, because there's a lot going on in Clank as well. So right on. So any other tips, strategies, or thoughts you care to share? Something I wanted to expand on a little bit is what I had been speaking when I spoke with Brandon. We kind of touched on this: CHOAM Directorship, Kwisatz Haderach. When I talk to most people in this game, a lot of people would say that Kwisatz Haderach is the best card in the game. Mostly they would say it's best if you can get it early game, and yes, I would agree with that. It is not nearly as good in the later game, because you're not going to be drawing it as frequently at that point. It isn't going to be as useful, but it is a extremely powerful card. I do not want to downplay that. It's just that it's my personal opinion that CHOAM Directorship is a more powerful card, and my argument for that is that you get to move every faction one space up, and then afterward you get 3 Solari every time you draw it on a reveal phase. You could trash it if you want, unless you want to keep getting that Solari. But yeah, trashing it isn't terribly difficult if you need to. But yeah, CHOAM Directorship is better because, as I had said before, Kwisatz Haderach is only good if you can get it kind of in the early part of the game. And it becomes less good the later the game becomes. Like, the older the game gets, like the more deeper into the rounds you go, the less valuable it is, the less good it is. So CHOAM Directorship is good, and I'll explain all the reasons why. Because just look at all the other ways getting CHOAM Directorship can score you more victory points than Kwisatz could even dream of, okay? Let's imagine that you get the Plans Within Plans Intrigue card. If you have 3 influence or more on 3 faction tracks, a free victory point. And if you have 3 or more on 4 faction tracks, that's 2 victory points. So there you go. There's one argument out of the way for why CHOAM is better than Kwisatz. Grand Conspiracy is another intrigue card. If you can manage to get 2 Dreadnoughts, 1, the spice must flow, 4 influence on 2 influence tracks, a seat on the High Council. If you have all 4 of those, that's 2 victory points. But if you have only 3 of those, that's 1 victory point. So if you can get +4 influence on only 2 influence tracks, you could potentially get an additional victory point, up to 2 even. So there are cards like that in the game that moving these influence trackers a lot will help you get more victory points. Look at this one over here, Memo Quarters, all right? When you purchase this tech tile, you get to move an influence track up 1, all right? And if you end the game with 3 influence or more on all 4 of your influence tracks, there's a victory point for you. CHOAM Directorship, another argument in the bank. All right, also, I want to just draw your attention to this as well. Shuttle Fleet, when you purchase that tech tile, you could choose 2 factions to increase by 1 when you purchase the tech tile. And there's even a conflict that you can get involved in that will allow you to have the same effect if you win first place in that conflict. So there are so many other ways that CHOAM Directorship is, in my opinion, a superior card to Kwisatz Haderach. I can understand the argument for why people like Kwisatz Haderach so very much. It is an extraordinarily powerful card, and I love the effect that it gives you to move your agent from one space to another. But remember that moving your agent from one space to another space isn't necessarily the best thing in the world, because if you move your agent from, say, Secrets to Hardy Warriors, okay, or whatever space it is. Wherever you leave your agent, now it's open to somebody else take that space. Somebody else is going to be able to take that space. So in a lot of ways, having an agent in a space is not bad. It's good because it blocks other people from taking those spaces unless they have a card that says otherwise. But Kwisatz is not always wonderful for that reason, although I still can't deny it's pretty awesome being able to do that because you get to share spaces with other agents. So yes, just something else I kind of wanted to mention for funsies is the Corner to the Market card. You know, that will help you if you decide to go forward with the Spice Must Flow strategy, if you happen to go with like Lady Jessica and getting those persuasion points. So yeah, I think that pretty much, okay. And so I don't know how long I've been recording at this point, but I've expanded quite a bit on my opening statement to you in response to all this. So you did respond, and I kind of want to just sort of go to that. So when you had asked about using your Seek Allies card, I had told you it would probably be best to use for the fold space position here. You wrote, that's interesting. I've played maybe 8 or 10 games so far, and I've only picked up fold space once in that time. My brain tells me it's not worth getting because it's a single-use card, but it's worth. But is it worthwhile to have that kind of flexibility when you draw it? And my answer to that is because you're still learning this game, it's just a good trade, because if you have moving these factions is so very important, right? And you start the game with a Diplomacy and a Seek Allies. That's 2 cards that will let you go to faction spaces. Now, it just so happens that the Imperium row that I've provided for you here, just for the example of this conversation, I've given you a lot of different cards that let you take different faction spaces, but it's more than likely that your typical Imperium row may not have any cards that offer faction spaces in the opening rounds of this game. If maybe there'll be only one card that offers a faction space, and it wouldn't be a Thufir or a power play. It would be like a Lady Jessica or something like that, where it would be like one faction. It'll let you go to one faction. So the fact of the matter is once you use your Seek Allies, it gets trashed, and it becomes extremely difficult to start going on these factions. I shouldn't say extremely difficult, but it definitely becomes more challenging to move these faction spaces once you get rid of one of the 2 cards that allow you to go to those spaces. So trashing your Seek Allies and then trading it for a fold space that lets you go to all the factions is a good trade-off. And not only that, but as I said before, once you trash out the fold space and you use it, you get to draw another card right on top of it. So it just sort of replaces itself in your hand with something new. So that's the reason why I think that, at least as a beginner, it's a good idea to use your Seek Allies for a fold space. If I didn't do a good enough job explaining it the first time, I think that makes it a little bit better. So you go on to say, I had responded by saying, yeah, I think, somebody, beg your pardon. I wrote, always start your game by looking at the Imperium row to see how you want to invest your influence and game. I think the cards you buy dictate the strategy more than anything, and oftentimes that first card you get, at least in my opinion, is the direction you should go. And that's sort of how I look at it. You know, the first card I buy, I'm going to think about all the ways I could maximize the utility of that card. And that means everything I do after that, buying that initial first card out of the Imperium row, I'm attempting to synergize other cards with it to maximize the power of my deck. So that's how I look at it. And you responded by saying, yeah, I think I'm playing wrong then. I mostly focus on what agents I want to send, and then I kind of just take what I can get from the Imperium row. Do you ever pass on taking an agent turn to save the points for purchasing? And I already responded to that. Yes, it just depends on what you're buying, how important it is to you. If it's a CHOAM directorship or a Kwisatz or a Lady Jessica, then yes, absolutely. And if it's an early game for Thufir Hawat or Gurney Halleck or something like that. Yes, those are powerful cards. They tend to be slightly pricier. I would say foregoing a agent phase is definitely worth it to do that if necessary. And so, yeah, and I think that pretty much wraps it up. If there's anything else I wanted to say to sort of finish my first episode of Plans Within Plans, I don't know. I guess what I would say is, I had mentioned this in when I was talking with Brandon Manning, that something I had learned, a technique that I had learned the hard way. You know, you learn you learn through your mistakes, right? Let's say it's agent phase 1 and I'm putting my agent on the board, right? And I'm so anxious to get my signet ring ability, whatever it is, that I'm like, oh, first round, I'm going to use my signet ring. Boom, I'm going to take Carthag. I put my agent on Carthag. I get a troop in my garrison. I take an intrigue card. I'm happy as a clam. And then it rolls over to my second agent phase. And I'm looking at the board and I go, oh boy, I really, really wanted to go to Arakeen or Imperial Basin or something like that, or not Imperial Basin, but the Mentet space or something like that. And I just don't have the cards that allow me to do it. You know, I'm looking at something like this, but I've already used my signet ring. And so now I have, look at these. So if I went to Carthag here, the point is, I'm trying to go off the cuff with my example, and it's turning out not to be a good example. I'm really sorry. Okay, let me try this again. Imagine it is your first agent phase, and you're looking at your starting hand, and it's something like this. If you think that Carthag is something you would like to do, or you would consider doing another space in your second agent phase, using a triangle card like Dune the Desert Planet is better to do on your first agent phase as opposed to your signet ring, because if it's a triangle space that you would like to utilize in your first agent phase, it's good to have your card with more spaces on it for your second agent phase. So first agent phase, use Dune the Desert Planet, go to triangle spaces wherever you want to go, smuggling, Imperial Basin, wherever you want to go. The Cell Melange, if it's the base game, whatever you want to do, use the single cards first. And that way, when you get to the second agent phase, as the board fills up with agents, you will have less places you can go. And the thing you thought you wanted to do, the thing that you wanted to do, but now you can't because an agent is in the place that you wanted to go, it's good to have more options than less options so that you can utilize your agent better. So that's my technique that I kind of picked up, because it's happened too many times where I went the other direction and I'm left with one option on the table, you know, this one triangle space. And I'm like, I didn't want to have to do that. Now I have to do something I didn't want to have to do, or forego the agent. So anyways, that's my little tip. I hope I did a good job explaining that. And thanks for joining me for the first episode of Plans Within Plans. Please remember to like and subscribe. And there will be a lot more Dune things coming down the road. Right now, I'm saving for a computer with microphone, a better camera, and I already have like all the equipment for the studio to work out. So this channel is going to get better, and I have plans to interview other interesting people who have been a part of the culture and community of this game. And those are, I also have learned a lot from my first discussion talking to the 2024 champion, Brandon Manning. Here's what I will say. I've heard everyone's criticism that I was a little too chatty. Sorry, I'm a little bit too chatty sometimes. I apologize for that. I'm not a professional interviewer. I attempted to research how to do a proper interview so I could go into it kind of knowing what to do. And I was nervous that I wasn't going to do it quite right. And I was also nervous that there would be awkward pauses because I'm not an interviewer. I don't know what to do with like dead moments, if you will, like moments of dead silence. I don't know what to do with those things. So my impulse was if there was a moment of silence, I would try to fill that space with some interesting dialogue, something I could add to the conversation. So I tried to keep that hamster wheel spinning, and that just caused me to run my motor mouth a little too much. And I was stepping all over Brandon, who deserved a better interview than what I provided. However, after putting some thought into how that interview went and how I can do better in the future, I'm no longer going to be advertising them as interviews. Rather, I will advertise them as discussions, because I'm not an interviewer. And I realized that after watching that, how I was pretty embarrassed with myself with how I conducted my conversation with Brandon. I'm not an interviewer, and I want to become one. I would like to get good at it, but let's just be honest. I'm better at discussing and having back and forth dialogue with people. And I feel like if it's advertised as just a frank discussion and not something like it's one other person you're listening to talk, it wouldn't be as offensive if I interjected at a time or two to have a sort of dialogue, a more natural sounding conversation. So from now on, I will advertise it as a discussion. However, with that said, I also recognize that I'm a motor mouth, as I continue to say. I will stifle myself. I will be generous in those conversations. I will be as generous to my guest as possible for the listening audience. And I really want to get better at this. I want to provide a quality product for this channel, for the Dune Imperium community. So please stay with me. Stay tuned. Like and subscribe. Share with your board gaming friends. Help me grow this channel. It's very young right now, and I'm working really hard at trying to get this thing going. And I promise it's going to be awesome. So with that said, I bid you adieu. Thanks for watching the show. And hey, Stormy Waters 2021, thank you for your questions. Those were pretty awesome. And enjoy your day. Bye for now.